Hope your 2025 is off to a good start. I'm joined by my colleague Feroz Syed. He's been here longer than I have, and so really knows everything about API security. He's worked with hundreds of organizations, so an incredible wealth of knowledge, expertise. Feroz, thank you for joining us today.
Lord, pleasure is all mine.
Thank you for joining us. They are Ghost from our Discord conversation just a half an hour ago. It's lovely to see you all and welcome. Today's session is really an update on this API scanner that we've been building. I say we, really, it's Feroz and his colleagues have been innovating and releasing new features and functionality into this product at a rapid pace. So we need these sessions almost every month just to share all of the newest capabilities. If you're not familiar with this tool that we're talking about, Christine, can you throw up the sign up link if you don't mind? Thank you. So we call it PLG, but really this is our free product, right? You can go and sign up and you can start analyzing your APIs within minutes. Feroz is going to show us exactly how that product works, but really some of the newest features. And I'll give you the sneak peek. So maybe, I know you're going to show us some cool things, but let's just start at the high level, right? So you're part of this organization, this engineering team. Tell us, what have you guys been doing for the last couple of months since we had this last one? And what's the feeling over there on the engineering side?
Hello, everyone. Yeah, it's been exciting, Dan. Just wanted to introduce myself to the wider audience. Let me start by saying that I'm Feroz. I've joined APIsec almost 6 years now. And it's been really exciting to work with APIsec and helping our customers on the cutting edge technology to ensure the API security posture and cybersecurity posture of their organization is maintained, as well as all the vulnerabilities are detected, remediated before their APIs go to production. Right. So it's been really exciting.
And you're a very humble person. Your depth of expertise is really remarkable. I've seen you working with so many organizations and helping them navigate through a complicated challenge of securing their APIs. So I know everyone is here to learn more. So let's start with GraphQL, right? So
Sure.
the last time we hosted one of these sessions, we supported REST APIs, which is, I think, probably still the most dominant, most popular protocol, but now we do support GraphQL. So tell us a little bit about that and what do people need to know about testing their GraphQL APIs?
Right. So the
Yeah, why don't you
status
share
of
your screen and just show
GraphQL.
people how they
Yeah,
can do it?
right. Absolutely. That will be great.
I myself am not a super graph expert, but I did try this feature out and I threw a GraphQL schema in and it worked amazingly well. It took almost no effort to do it.
Absolutely. All right. So I hope my screen is visible and we are
Yep,
just going to
see it.
register GraphQL schema in a moment. So, right. So if you have logged in, once you're on the home page, when we click on add applications, we'll see that the GraphQL tile is enabled now. This is the option that we provide today to upload SDL. And then once we have uploaded the library here, we will be able to parse all the information from this file and identify different queries or mutations that are part of this file. And going forward, we are also going to support upload introspection query as well as introspection. These are two important ways through which you will be able to register GraphQL API, which is under development right now. And very soon we'll have these features ready for our target audience. Right now, the option that we support today is an SDL file, which you need to export and keep it ready for application registration. Let's go ahead and quickly register one for this demo. Let me call it as DVGA. This is the vulnerable GraphQL API that I'm going to upload. There you go, just a single file. All right, now click continue. And as you expect, you have to get the instance URL from the DVGA file, but in case if it is not available, you can manually add it during onboarding of API. And this is what I'm going to do right now. Update the instance URL and click onboard. That's it. So 3 simple steps and APIsec will start registering GraphQL. It will analyze, create attack scenarios, and then update the app model, get a list of all queries and mutations if there are any. So here, these are all queries as we could see, and these are the query documents. So this is another feature that I wanted to talk about, which is endpoint level parameter configuration. This can be editable in the future, where we will allow users to update query documents, add more parameters, or define set values to these attributes, in addition to making this specific endpoint, if it is detected as unauthenticated or unprotected endpoint, unsecure endpoint, you'll be able to modify these details over here. But no, this is not an unauthorized endpoint. It is actually an authorized endpoint, and you need credentials. So all those discrepancies that we usually get with an OpenAPI spec can be corrected with limited effort by updating the values directly here, assigning values to path parameters, or assigning values to headers or query parameters, etc.
And Feroz, can you show us the security coverage area?
I scroll up, let's go to security coverage. Yeah, most of these are related to REST APIs, and we are also going to have specialized categories related to GraphQL. So as you could see over here, we have response headers, payload injections, authorization, and authentication exploit related categories, which are related to access token, information leak, which is PII, or access token data leak, etc. From authentication exploit to authorization, or mass assignment, broken object level authorization, etc. Right? These are the categories that will be covered and will be tested with the GraphQL.
The product will actually create these simulations for you, right? And that's really what we're trying to do here, is just give you that broad-based coverage without you having to sit down and manually craft all these different simulations and so forth. I did see this one question from Arjun. How about Swagger? And our good friend Iwan has already answered this, but yeah, absolutely, right? And maybe just pop back to the applications if you don't mind, and just show the add application. That's just Open API spec. I guess they renamed it to, they renamed Swagger to Open API spec. Yeah, so just click on that, and you'll be able to add your Swagger file, whether it's on a file or at a location, a URL, for example. I think we have APIsec.ai/crappy-OAS is actually a valid spec file. And there you go. All right. Yeah, you're showing us the whole process here. So at any rate, there you go. So it can be a file or a URL. And there's another question here from Ankur on gRPC. I think that is on our roadmap. Is that correct, Feroz?
Yes, Dan. It is in our roadmap, and we will be announcing the dates later. But yeah, we do have it in our roadmap.
And I love the questions. Hey, it's great. And Arjun has another one. Maybe you could show the pen test report. Do you have one handy that you can show to folks? So we're talking about OWASP top 10.
Yep, sounds good. So yeah, let me navigate to this application where we have around 134 different vulnerabilities. And if we go to reports, we have a couple of out-of-the-box reports that we support, including a penetration test report and OWASP top 10 coverage report. These are the ones. So if you go to OWASP coverage report, you will find the number of vulnerabilities that we have identified in each OWASP category and what's the CVSS score around it.
Yeah, super cool. All of the test categories, maybe you could show the security categories. They're all mapped to OWASP categories as well. If you go back to the main view. Yeah, there. And then click on the security categories, the coverage. You see along the left side, right? All of these categories are tagged to the relevant OWASP section as well, 2023 and 2019. So hopefully that answers your question. Another interesting question from Snehan Kit. We do integrate with Postman. I don't know what Newman scripts are. Are you familiar with that, Feroz?
No, I don't see that question.
Oh, I just posted it on the screen. But at any rate, the question is, can we integrate this with Postman Newman scripts? But
Yeah. We can integrate it with Postman as of today. We support a Postman integration.
this is one of our most common use cases. People have their Postman collections, their Postman environment. You can absolutely take those and publish them into APIsec, or you can actually integrate right into the gateway. Yeah, Feroz, why don't you tell us what you're looking at here?
Right. So as you could see over here, we have a Postman integration that is available. And when you click on onboard applications, you will find various workspaces that you have. And once you have selected a Postman collection, you'll be able to onboard it. And that's how we will register an application and onboard all the endpoints, all the requests. We call it as requests in Postman collection. So we'll import all the requests as unique endpoints in APIsec for you to test and run OWASP top 10 security categories.
Yeah, super cool. So it's a very common thing to do to integrate with Postman. It's one of our most popular integrations. I do want to get to the other things here, but the questions are so good and they're flying. Can the tool test an API without login credentials? Well, I know the answer to that is yes. That is kind of the default, but you can also go beyond that. So yeah, give us. Can you show us kind of the authentication area and so forth?
Right, right. Yeah. So let me talk about the app model here for a moment. Yeah. So once you register an application, you will find that we will detect whether the application instance URL is reachable or not. And also there is a question that someone is asking whether I can use ngrok URL or not, right? So yes, wherever it is hosted, as long as it is accessible over the internet, we will be able to test it wherever the application is hosted. In fact, ngrok is a good tool to host your applications and test it quickly, right? So we do support these URLs that are either hosted on ngrok or anywhere else. Right now, it needs to be accessible over the internet. And in the future, we are talking about hosted agents as well. So let me just give you a quick demonstration of what exactly it is. So let's say if I add a new instance, let me call it as https crappy.apisec.ai. All right. Or let me change it to net banking because I know that this is not going to be this is not going to be accessible. And when I click on add, you will see that we are going to test whether this is reachable or not. And once we identify whether it is reachable or not, we will suggest a few things such as downloading a hosted agent and deploying it locally so that we can test it across even if the URL is not accessible over the internet. So that's exactly what we are going to do. This is not reachable right now, but there is a complete flow, right? Like when I change it to HTTP, now if I click on test reachability, this is how you will see that it will be, the reachability will be tested first, and it will detect whether it is reachable over the internet or not. If it is not reachable, then we will ask users to download a private hosted agent and deploy it within their environment.
Yeah, hosted agent, just to explain to folks, it's basically very common requirement. I want to test an API that is maybe in a staging environment, in QA. It's not internet accessible. The way to test those is to deploy a local hosted agent. And what is that, like a Docker container or something like that?
Exactly. So it will be a Docker container or a Kubernetes offering that the user has to deploy and ensure that there are certain requirements, the way it can communicate with the cloud. So it is going to be an outbound connection to cloud. And I don't want to reveal all the details right away because, as soon as it is available, we'll also have a video and all the related documentation for deployment and ensuring what requirements they have to fulfill for a successful deployment.
Yep. And let's move on. There are so many awesome questions here. Can we check the privilege escalation, how broken access control, like we have two role admin and normal user having different JWT, so do we have to manually give the JOT, or how is it? So I think this is maybe a good segue to talking about our RBAC testing. Do you want to walk us through that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's quickly go ahead and watch the demo for RBAC and then followed by BOLA. Um,
Yep.
for RBAC, I would like to demonstrate using net banking API. API for RBAC, and then let me use the URL. Go. All right, so just confirm once the instance URL is selected and onboarded, we will start registering the application. Once the application is ready, right, so as you could see over here, we can get started with an unauthenticated scan, but I would like to jump straight away to RBAC and show you that we can quickly go ahead and test this functionality as well. So before you test RBAC, of course, you will be running a few unauthenticated tests, right? And you will configure credentials, but we don't want to stop users from testing RBAC if they haven't completed those steps yet. It is recommended that you follow the pattern that we have so that it completes all the gaps, right? You identify those endpoints which are accessible without any authentication, and then you move on to running an authenticated scan to like identifying the parameter configuration that are required to test all these endpoints correctly, and then finally test with RBAC. However, just wanted to show this part, even in a new application, how could we configure, let us call this as user one, all right? Authentication type is basic that I'll be using. Let me enter the username and password
Well,
for,
and while you're setting
yeah,
that up, so I guess the idea here is you're going to create multiple account types. So like a regular user or a support person or a dev, admin, and so forth. Is that the idea?
that's right. That's right. So the idea here is like add authentications first, right? So this is exactly what we are doing right now. And then we will associate them to different roles, right? Which exists in our application. So user two, user one, user two. Again, user two is going to be basic authentication. I'll change this to user five, admin. All right, save the credentials. Then let's add one more. Okay, so we have three unique credentials right now. Save the credentials.
Yep.
And now, right, so user two is actually role user. So let me just add the role as role user, whereas this user is role PM, and the last one is role admin.
I think Jesse is asking this exact question. We're creating user profile presets to test endpoints with, and that's right. So in this application, there are different user types, and we're going to exercise those different roles against the API to look for discrepancies or anything like that. Is that what you're going to show next?
Exactly. And then you may have different credentials available in your application, but you can include or exclude some of these roles. So if you haven't defined any roles, they won't appear in the next screen, but you have associated a role, then they will appear. Then they will appear in the next screen. Let's say if you have assigned the same role, you will see that there is a choice to either select user 2 or user 6, right? Because you will be testing RBAC with unique roles. So this is the reason why you need to specify the right roles. And once you have selected a specific role, just go ahead and include them for RBAC and click on Discover RBAC permissions. Once you click on Discover RBAC permissions, you will see that APIsec will execute a dry run and it will quickly check whether these endpoints are accessible with the given credentials and which endpoints are accessible, which endpoints are not. We'll create a map and display it very clearly over here.
Yeah, and I think this is a nice comment from Jesse. And the tool, as it's running its tests, will show results for all the different levels. That's awesome. That's exactly what you're going to see here, right? This is effectively like an RBAC map. It will tell you what endpoints different roles can access. So yeah, walk us through what we're looking at.
Right. So this is a permission or an RBAC metrics, we could say, that we have discovered various endpoints that are accessible with the given credentials. So role user has access to API v1 transfers, etc., but they are unauthorized to access API v1 transfer ID. So we do detect all these permissions automatically, and you can simply go ahead and start running RBAC scans immediately. At the same time, you can also review the permissions and see if there are any corrections, right? Like system has detected that API v1 transfers get is accessible. However, if it is restricted, you just need to switch it to no. So by switching it to no, the configurations will be automatically saved. And when you start running RBAC, this will be detected as a vulnerability because this was ideally supposed to be a restricted permission, whereas now it is accessible. So until your developers fix this vulnerability, we will keep calling it as not accessible, and we'll keep calling it as a vulnerability.
And Feroz, there's a question from Johan. Is the accessible or inaccessible based on status code in the response?
That's right. That's right. So we are using status code right now to detect whether it is accessible or inaccessible. And I don't see any inconclusive here in this particular API, but there is one more thing which is inconclusive, especially for those endpoints that return a 302 or a 500 response code, which we are not sure whether it is accessible or inaccessible. So we do keep them away. We don't test them in the main RBAC scans.
There's a question from Snehan Kit. Can we get status code they have shown like 403 forbidden? Right? Is there a way to see the status codes?
Yeah, we don't present it on the screen right away, but once you have executed a scan. So why don't we do one thing? Let's go ahead and start RBAC so that we can run a scan and finally look at the logs. We don't have logs here on this particular screen, but yes, we can look at it in the detailed execution logs. Besides this, let me also show that the same has been detected for the other user, which is role admin. So I might have mixed up with the credentials, but ideally you will see that role admin will have more privileges than role user, and this will be accessible as well.
And one of the cool things for us is like you showed how like you can mark like yes or no, like what is it meant to be, and we will detect if the permissions deviate from what has been defined here, and that's a really valuable feature, right? So we know security teams always struggle to know if permissions sort of drift over time. This is going to give you a way to monitor for that, correct?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So the expected result for admin, let's say, is accessible, right? And the permissions that we have discovered are incorrect, then you can mark it as no, which means that it should be accessible. And as you can see that immediately we save this configuration. When you include them in RBAC, you will find that this specific permission will be raised or will be flagged as a vulnerability because there is a discrepancy between what is expected from this role and what was detected.
Yeah, so it'll show up in the vulnerabilities tab.
Exactly.
Cool.
So let's go ahead and run a quick scan all endpoints, and then I'm definitely going to use one of these credentials that we have defined. Let me pick up user one and click initiate scan. But behind the screen for RBAC and BOLA, the configurations that we have and the permissions that we have defined will be used to test all of them irrespective of whether you have used user 1 or user 2.
Okay.
Right. So
got it.
yeah.
And for people who are asking for like the details, when the results come back, it might take a minute here, so maybe we can look at this later. You will have all of the request and response logs. You'll be able to see all of the details, what kind of codes returned and so forth. Is that correct?
Yeah, exactly. In fact, while it is running a scan, we can go to scans progress and look at the logs right away. So as you could see over here, test execution summary will give me results per endpoint. So these are the endpoints that have been tested already, right? So
Oh,
you
wow.
just expand it and you will see which tests have passed, which tests have been skipped, maybe because of the configurations that we need to add, etc. Right? Let me show you that this has successfully passed.
We got a 200.
Yeah, yeah, we got a 200, and the expected headers that we were expecting from this is available.
Yeah.
So due to that reason, it has passed actually, right? So just one thing, RBAC and BOLA will be executed at a later stage. So we just need to wait a few more minutes for those. Once it has been completed, you will see those RBAC scans appearing over here. When you click on it, it will show you with all the different credentials that we have enabled has been
Yeah.
executed and what's the status code.
There's a question here from Abhijit about, can we configure the proxy in APIsec to route the traffic through burp or zap for debugging? I imagine if you want to route traffic through a proxy, that's really more of a network question, right? Is that correct, Feroz?
Yeah, exactly. And it is moreover, you know, whether you would like to add a proxy in front of your application server and monitor traffic through that proxy, right? For us, it will be like, you know, we'll be using the instance URL as your proxy URL, and proxy can internally redirect the traffic to your application server, right? That's how you'll be able to monitor the
Yeah.
traffic and see how it is flowing.
I want to make sure we get through everything. One of the most interesting or challenging things is BOLA testing, right?
Yeah.
Authorization testing. So can we shift gears? It's sort of related to RBAC testing in that the idea is, we're going to look for cross-account contamination, as I like to call it, right? Can user B access user A's data? And this is a new feature that's been released in the last month or so. So can you walk us through this?
Absolutely. Yeah. Let me quickly add an application. I should have like added these applications before this demo, but yeah, let me quickly upload the crappy API for BOLA.
And while you're loading that up, I'll just answer a few questions. So from Sajid, how is authenticated scan done? There is a component, actually, Froze will show it here momentarily, because for BOLA, you do have to have multiple credentials, like a user A account, a user B account. So there is a utility for creating credentials in the product, right? And you already showed like basic authentication, but it could be OAuth, it could be a key, it could be a token, a number of different ways to set up authentication. Yeah, that's exactly what you see there. And then it will utilize whatever credentials you want to use when you initiate a scan, right? So
Yep.
that's hopefully answers your question, Abhijit, on how to do it. But let's go walk through the BOLA process. I think that will reinforce the question as well.
Absolutely. So the same thing again, we just onboarded crappy API. And before I could go ahead and run BOLA, there are other configurations and other scans that you can run, but we will jump the queue and quickly configure BOLA, right? So to get started with BOLA, please remember that we need at least two peer credentials, right? If you have a role user credential, then please ensure that you get role user credential for user A and user B testing. They should not be a user admin and user role user credential, because you're trying to find whether one user's data is accessible by other peer user or not, right? So they both need to be peer user. This is the requirement that we recommend. And now to get started, right? So you need to know about the API first to understand what type of attack scenarios apply for BOLA. For example, the crappy API, where we know that a user can place an order, and once an order is placed, you can get the order ID to see whether user B can access user A's order ID or not, whether user B can access, update the order ID or not, or they can return the order that belongs to user A or not. These type of tests are executed in BOLA, right? So it is very simple and straightforward to configure BOLA attack scenario. Let me call it as order attack scenario, order get. All right. So, or let me call it as order attack scenario. That's it. All right. Now we don't have any authentications defined yet in this particular application. So let me go ahead and add user A and user B credentials, and we'll be using bearer token authentication. Okay. So here is the authentication URL. Credentials, step 01. These are the test credentials that I'm using. And then we just need to change the content type to application JSON, and username key is actually an email. All right. Now save credentials and you will be able to extract token. It is going to generate a token dynamically, right? With these credentials that you have supplied here. And then where exactly you would like to place this authorization value, whether it is in header, and we are also going to support it in query and body parameters in the future. And then in addition to that, if there are any additional headers or additional body parameters, they can be configured as well. The username key is called as username, switch it to that, or you can use custom tag, like if it is just uname, right, or UID. You can change that as well. And what's the content type of it? If it is application JSON or form URL encoded, you can switch between that. That's all, and then just save the credentials. So the very first step is to name the attack scenario, and then select the user credentials that you have configured. Go to the next screen, and this is an important step wherein you want to say that, okay, before I test whether specific resources are accessible, specific resources, resource IDs are accessible. Like if you generate an order, whether order ID is accessible by user B or not, right? And similarly, if you create a project, whether project ID is accessible by user B or not, what do we need to do first is we have to select whether is it a create resource or a select resource, right? What does it mean? It means that dynamically we will create a new resource. We'll place a new order each time you test attack scenario, or you are going to provide an existing order ID if it is a select resource. So you can specify which endpoint it is, and then what's the value, what's the scope of it, whether it is accessible to all users, or is it specific to a resource owner, right? So when it is a create resource, it is pretty obvious that it belongs to the resource owner, the one who is actually creating a resource. Now, we just need to select the endpoint that generates an order, which is Post API shop orders. That's it. And if there is a cleanup endpoint that you would like to call as well, you can delete the project as well, right? For when you place an order, you can return the order once the test is completed. In the life cycle of attack scenarios, you leave the environment clean and you don't pile up all the test IDs or all the IDs in your test environment. So to avoid that, you can also go ahead and configure the cleanup endpoint as well. But right now, I'm just going to go ahead with create resource, and then what are the attack scenarios that are associated to order endpoints. As you could see over here, there are a lot of operations that we can do in consecutive testing, right? Once the order is placed, now I can update the order, I can get the order details by order ID, which was retrieved from the previous endpoint, right? The base endpoint that we have configured. And then finally, you can return an order as well. Now, once you have selected which attack scenarios you would like to test, click Next. And over here, you can change the sequence in which you would like to call. For example, I would like to get the order by order ID first, and then I would like to test whether I can modify the order or not. And then finally, I would like to return the order, and that's how I'll complete the BOLA attack scenario testing. So this is very cool and easy to use UI where you can change the sequence, you can go back and add more scenarios to it, change the scope of it as well. For example, if I say it is accessible to all, then if user B is able to access this endpoint, it will not be called as a vulnerability because you have updated the scope of it as accessible to all in comparison to accessible to only resource owner, which is the ideal testing, right? Where BOLA test scenarios say that user B should not be authorized to access resource IDs that are created by user A. That's it. Now let's go ahead and click on test scenario. Quickly conduct a test.
For
Right. So if there are any issues within the configuration, if there are any issues with the credentials, if it is unable to place an order or get the order, then it will, you know, keep the status or change the status to pending. Otherwise, it will be ready for enabling it in BOLA and then going ahead with the actual scans. So there could be some configuration problem like it is authentication related issue due to which it is, still in pending state. Yeah. Questions, Dan?
and so these scenarios that you're creating, they will be saved, right? So someone could create multiple BOLA configurations, if you will, and then they would just become part of the attack simulation library. So you could just sort of build these over time and refine and add more coverage and so forth. Is that kind of the idea?
That's right. That's right. Right. So you can keep adding new attack scenarios like for the same order. Let us say I would like to test it in a different way. Instead of using a post endpoint, I would like to use a select resource.
Mm-hmm.
Then say this is the base endpoint and the order ID that I would like to test with is 365. I hope this is a valid order ID which has not been returned yet. And to whom it belongs to, just associate it with a
Right.
user like user A and set the scope, whether it is accessible to all or accessible to resource owner. That's it. And rest of the attack scenarios can also be configured here,
Yeah.
where order by order ID, get and put, that's all. And then test the scenario once again.
And this
So
and
this is
what
how
you
we can keep, yeah.
we have some pretty exceptional innovations around the corner here, everyone. So stay tuned. We're going to do a lot more sessions on BOLA to make this even more intuitive, more automated, and so forth. One thing I want to announce, and maybe for you, Feroz, we can shift gears to the Kong integration demo. We'll do that next. I want to invite you all to our Discord server. This is an area where you can have like an ongoing conversation with us. I know there's some specific questions about authorization scenarios and where to get the object IDs and so forth. So we'll throw up the Discord link here. If you're not part of Discord, that's a great place to go get involved, and we can continue the conversation outside of here. But we got about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure we talk about Kong. We have a really cool integration here. We actually have an event that we're hosting with Kong like tomorrow or something, I think, Christine. So there it is next week. But Froze, can you walk us through the Kong integration?
Yes, absolutely. Right. So Kong integration is pretty unique in a way because if you look at rest of the integrations that we have, be it Postman collection to Swagger Hub or Apigee, Azure, AWS, they all store API specifications within their gateways. But when it comes to Kong, Kong does not rely on API specifications or it does not use API specifications to manage those APIs. Rather, it uses configuration files. If you have heard about a deck file, which can be used to export all the configurations. So there are two ways to onboard APIs with Kong. Very first option that you will see here is a deck file, right, which is a deck dump, deck gateway dump that you can get out of your Kong gateway. Kong gateway will have all the services and routes within it, and this is exactly what APIsec uses to generate an open API spec on the fly. So we are actually generating an open API spec using this information and then registering an application. So this is exactly how it works. I'm just going to demonstrate first with a deck file.
We know Kong is extremely popular out there. We wanted to, across the board, we want to integrate this testing technology with whatever platform you're using to manage your API. So with Kong, this is a really cool way to integrate.
Yep, absolutely. Right. So as you could see, I've just given a name to this project, and then I'll click on next after uploading the file. And as soon as we upload a file, it will list all the server URLs within the Kong gateway, because there could be multiple services within a deck file, and there could be multiple routes and endpoint paths within a service. So what we are trying to do over here is, like, we will list out all the server URLs, the unique server URLs. And once you select a server URL over here, or a host name, we will collect all the services, routes, and endpoints that are corresponding to a specific application. And that's how we'll be able to onboard them. And once you have onboarded, you will see that an application will be created and endpoints that are part of a deck file will be registered. So bank account ID, etc. So these are the endpoints that we have detected from the deck file. Okay, now let's move on to the integration part. So as you could see over here, we can also integrate a Kong instance, right? So when you navigate to integrations, you will find onboard applications button on this tile, Kong API gateway. And there are two different buttons over here to onboard applications, which will list all the services that you have or you can manage. In case the credentials have changed, you can come here and update the credentials. Right. So currently we only support two different types of authentication, a basic and API key, using which you can configure. And the server URL that you see over here is actually an admin API. And admin API is something through which you can interact with your Kong gateway to fetch total number of services that you have and the routes within a specific service. Back to Kong gateway, onboard application. Here is a list of services that you have. Click on Pet Store API, continue. Here is the instance URL that you'll be using to test. That's it. So seamlessly, you can get all the services from your Kong gateway and register them as individual applications in APIsec.
Yeah. Super cool. Super cool. One thing I wanted to make sure people know, we do now support team collaboration in the product. Last time we did this call, it was kind of a single user mode. Is there anything you can show here or at least point people in the right direction, Feroz?
Yep, sure, certainly. So we have my teams and browse teams. Currently, I'm logged in as role user, not as a role administrator. I need to switch to a different credential. Yep, to show you the business units and teams that we can create. And once we have created business units and teams, then you will be able to use them and associate members to it. The actual purpose of this teams is to share these applications with other users. For example, if I go to this application, when I click on administration, I can go ahead and share it with a team, or I can share it with an individual as well. I just need to type the name of that user, click, hit enter. If user is not available, this is what you're going to get. And currently we don't have the feature to invite new users yet, but this is how you'll be able to validate whether a specific user is available or not. And
wow, we've covered a lot of ground here, Feroz, and so I just want to thank you for being so generous with your time. I know it's quite late, and for sharing all these wonderful new features that you and the team have been putting together. I think the feedback has been very, very positive here in the chat. And I know we didn't get through everyone's questions here. Please do check out that Discord link. That's a great place to continue chatting with me, Christine, Feroz, and others. If you got questions you want to have answered. We do have people asking, is this freely available? Yes, absolutely. You can access this. We have a free forever license on our website. Thanks again for joining us from all around the world. Hopefully see you next month on APIsecCon and in Discord as well, and maybe even the Ambassador program. So with that, thanks a lot, and thank you, everybody. See you soon.